Hi everyone. Please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So by now, I'm guessing most of you are aware of this Epstein situation that has surfaced in recent days, and in fact appeared to reach a kind of peak momentum in tandem with the full moon we were just in, also in the last couple of days. And there, my sense is that the moon being in Capricorn Cancer, sun in Cancer, moon in Capricorn, and as often happens in astrology, astrology is, you could say, the art/science of the meaningful coincidence, where you see planets being triggered. And in Epstein's chart, even though he's no longer with us since 2019, although if you start tuning into all the conspiracies on this topic, some people may even say, no, he's still here, it didn't really happen, or some other crazy thing. But let's just assume he's not. However, the chart is still operative in terms of describing the situation, and there you see that he has, or had rather, Mercury 21 degrees range Capricorn, square Saturn, Neptune, and Libra. Then he has Uranus in Cancer opposing, and he has the moon in Eris with a degree range, because no birth time is known, only the birth day is known, but there is a grand cross in cardinal signs, and this full moon triggered it in a big way. But then you of course have to go toward the other charts that are important in this fiasco, and one of them is of course the president's chart, and you start to see the patterns there also being reflected in what is going on. And here's where you see the effect of a planet in transit working in more than one way, and that would be Jupiter. And you'll remember that I said in prior videos that Jupiter moving into Cancer would not be a good development for Trump, because in Cancer it starts to join that T-square in his chart, the T-square that is formed by Eris, Neptune, and Mercury. And so then things can go wrong, bottom line. In part, it's because a person experiencing this kind of planet action becomes overconfident, miscalculates, and then it leads to problems. On that level, I would look back at what happened with the Iran strike. By then Jupiter was already in the zone. And when a person makes a mistake like that, you may see it at the time, but more often, or at least half the time, it happens later, typically with Saturn coming in to the same zone, but it's not there yet. So on the level of that particular thing, we'll see. Time will tell. Saturn will reach that zone, but it doesn't until next year. However, that same zone is the 12th house in his chart. It's where the Cancer planets are. And 12th is a place where you can run into all kinds of problems. It's a complicated house. There's no doubt about it. And one of the connections in that house, because it happens to be the 8th from the 5th. If you make the 5th house number 1 and you count from there, you reach the 8th. When you get to the 12th, you count, the 6th becomes the 2nd, the 7th becomes the 3rd, and so on. So then, it's why that 12th place, 12th house, is the house of secret love affairs, because the 5th is the house of love affairs themselves. And when you're looking at this kind of thing, what went on with Epstein, although we have to always say in brackets, allegedly, because all of this is swirling around, and of course we know that there is a lot of suspicion, because They're shown in so many pictures. Back in the day, they were clearly good friends. They were hanging out, and hanging out is in quotes. You know what that could mean in a situation like this. But it's the 12th house. And, separately, 12th house is known to be a place of trouble, self-undoing. Things can go really wrong in there. And Jupiter going through there, on the one hand, you might say, well, that could protect you. Not when there are T-squares involved. If anything, it'll stir things up, which is, in fact, what it has done. Because right now, Jupiter is in those degrees where it's triggering the planets that are part of that alignment. The 12th house planet is Mercury. Jupiter is yet to reach it. It will later this month. But the planets that square into there, Eris and Neptune, are already implicated. So you're triggering the formation, which is why this is going on. And so that's one level. So then you begin to ask, okay, well, does this thing have legs? Is it as big a scandal as people are saying? It may be, and I'll tell you why. In the short term, you've got the Jupiter going through there the rest of the month. If you are expecting the pressure to abate, Jupiter has to get to later degrees, and it doesn't do that until minimum next month, middle of August, in that range. So that's a certain amount of time. But the other problem is that a planet you would always, or nearly always, associate with this kind of activity as well is Eris, the planet that was discovered in 2005, which led to the demotion of Pluto. And this is a bit comical when you realize that astronomers will often reject astrology, but comedically they synchronistically name the planets exactly as they are, exactly as what they represent. And so Eris, being the goddess of discord, first of all, it's a female goddess. That's something that isn't represented anywhere else in the chart except for, say, Venus and the Moon, that have been around for millennia in astrology. But Eris is a new dimension that, in fact, really counters the Pluto energy. It becomes, in a sense, the enemy of Pluto. And Eris, in Trump's chart, is a very problematic planet. It's part of that T-square. And indeed, because it moves really, really slowly, it has taken years and years and years to go from the 6-degree range to the 25-degree range, where it's now parked and just glacially moving along. And his problem is that it's squaring his Venus. And I had talked about many times in many videos in the last few years about how this was a constant threat, matters related to women writ large. This is one of those matters, for sure, particularly because it's pointing to the 12th in terms of hidden things, criminal patterns, because that's the 12th as well. And when you then add on top of that in a totally separate measurement, in astrology, the solar arc measurement, which means that you're adding the amount that the sun moves day by day to each planet. So in broad terms, you would say it's about like adding a degree every year a person lives. It's not exactly that, because the sun moves differently at different times of the year, but it's pretty close to that. Well, it turns out that in that measurement, the Eris, you put it forward a degree at a time. Well, right now it's right where his sun degrees are. So it really brings it into the foreground. I had surmised, and this has happened, to a pretty major extent, that, for example, women judges would be constantly a thorn on his side, and they have been, but he's managed to sidestep that pretty well. This, though, is clear pointing in that direction, and the Eris is there now, but in solar arc it's there next year as well. So in the near term, though, the Eris this month is making a station. Eris, in its elliptical movement, 550-year orbit, what it's doing is, in this period of time, this decade, it's stationing really early in the year, January, and then in July. And you'll recall that last year, when Eris stationed, was the period when Kamala was entering the race, and he was really off balance. July and August, he then adapted, but the period was very uncomfortable because of the Eris, which was reflecting a female figure. Now, it's something completely different, but still fitting into the Eris pattern. And so what this means is that you're looking at the same pattern again, giving this topic momentum at least going into the middle of next month. But then where it can become a real problem is when you see patterns to all these planets, these cardinal planets that you see you see it in Trump's chart for sure, the three, but then you also see them in Epstein's chart, and you see them in the composite getting activated next year. And I often think, if you think Jupiter is a problem, Saturn is a much bigger problem. It can really entangle you in a major mess. So there is some strong possibility that this could become a huge issue. I don't know quite yet how that would happen, given that he has control of the Justice Department, and how any of that comeuppance would take place. But we are noticing that it's causing a lot of dissension in the Maga movement because they were attached to the crazy conspiracy that this was all Democrats. All the pedophiles were Democrats. They created this fiction. But now it's looking like none of that is true. What is actually more true is that it's implicating the president himself potentially. And so even though it's one among many things that we've come across with this guy, this one is dangerous, and I would expect it to, at minimum, remain a powerful topic for the next month or so, and the threat of it returning next year is definitely there, because when you see the three charts in this particular case, meaning Trump's, Epstein's, and the composite chart. Now I'll have to do a video on the role of Musk in all this, because that's a fascinating pattern as well and reveals even more information.